welcome back to another episode of Nexty Talks, this podcast that is brought to you by Nexty Sports Management. I'm your host, Leo de Souza, and today, Nexty Talks Football Freestyle with Dan Wood. Dan is a co-founder, head of partnerships of the World Football Freestyle Association, and a guy that is extremely involved with this industry. He's a professor, he is a football advocate, he's a fan, a father, and I am very excited to get the chance to talk to him today. Dan, how is it going?
Going good, Leo. Thank you so much for the invite here. It's a pleasure to be part of your series, and I look forward to catching up with you. First of all, it's been a while, and talking through. Hopefully, there's some words of inspiration and things that can add value to your network here.
I'm sure we'll get to that. So Dan is a professor in several schools across Europe. Right now, we were chatting here earlier. Right now, you are in Valencia.
I am indeed,
right, Dan?
Yes. Any excuse to travel, first of all. That's the way I live my life. Any opportunity to experience new places, new people, cultures. I've been fortunate enough to follow that, throughout my career as part of my dream, which is just constantly learning. And as you said, in the education space, I'm very active. I massively support and believe that more people should have access, first and foremost, to more education and more opportunities. So I try to give my time and attention to as many people as I can in that space. A lot of universities, I'm based in Europe, but now going over to the Americas more as well, actually with the University of Maine, doing some work at the moment, and also in Asia, in Southeast Asia quite a bit as well. So again, no boundaries. I like to just to be as active as I possibly can.
Nice, that's awesome. I put a little bit of a
nice touch
there for you.
Yeah.
So that's a 1984 Guardiola. Yeah, that's a good. I had a Germany one because we were supposed to talk last week. Yeah. You're in Germany, so I really got to go through my jersey collection when talking to you because they never.
Yeah, I know. I think we should have a more regular one and just test the extent of your closet. Nice touch.
Then we normally start from the beginning, right? So I want to know, like we've had several conversations, but we never quite got to this topic. How was little Dan? Where were you born, and what took you to this universe of sports to begin with? What was what sparked your interest in this industry, and how was your upbringing?
Nice. I like reflection, memory time. Right. So I am from the UK, as you mentioned. I live in Germany. I travel all the time, but I'm from the UK, from a very small town in the southwest of England called Yeovil, famed for their football team. Actually, quite often would get to the third round of the FA Cup, our big cup competition in England, and meet some big Premier League teams. Never win, but they would get to the third round at least. So I'm from a small town. So growing up, I would say there was nothing extraordinary, but there was also, compared to what I've experienced across my travels, I would say I'm very, very grateful for everything that my parents, did and enabled for me. So I went to school, went to college in Yeovil, and then went to Bournemouth University on the south coast to study sports marketing for 4 years. So that was kind of my education escape there. No set plan, to be honest. I grew up, playing a lot of sport. Tennis was actually my first sport, and then football and badminton and anything with a racket, first of all, and then of course football and a bit of basketball. I was literally playing in the streets and in clubs, every day of the week, from what I can remember. My parents ferrying me around to all kinds of events and training practices. So yeah, sport first, and I think from a very early age, actually. So I remember I was 14, 15 in my first kind of formal job, part-time job, you could say. I did many different things, paper rounds and helping out on the construction sites. But I specifically remember a sports retailer. So I was working as a Saturday sales assistant in a sports retailer at 15. And I loved it. First of all, I loved the vibe. I loved the people involved in that space. And then I met the Reebok and the Adidas representatives that would travel around the country to train the sales staff on, the latest technologies and the new products coming out into the market. And I was fascinated firstly by them because of their world. So, dressed head to toe in branded gear, a branded car, and they would literally be these free spirits. Yeah. I was like, wow, this is amazing. How'd you get your job? And that was one of the triggers. My father's been self-employed his whole life. So seeing him being around the family, having that flexibility to travel, to spend time with the family, for me was another early trigger that really kind of, I guess, inspired me to say, one day I want to work for myself. I want that flexibility in my life. But I'd say, as I said, that working experience fascinated me so much so that, I was never, in my mind, I was never going to be dedicated enough to be a professional sportsman. I think every kid has that dream still, but I knew deep down from that age range as well that I was, I didn't have the staying power. I was representing my country at one level in tennis when I was 14, and then my region when I got to 15, 16. I was playing at local, Yeovil town level, youth level. But everyone else was so dedicated and committed and wanting to be the best possible athletes. And I was just enjoying it. I was like having the best time traveling and hanging out with friends playing sport. So I think, that culmination for me, I just paid attention to it. I would say that's one very thing that I was very conscious of. I was aware that I wasn't committed to what it takes to be a pro player, even at that age, and inspired by the industry of sport. And I was like, what an amazing social place to be.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And then after college, what was the route there? You started already working in the industry, or you had some different routes prior to getting introduced to it?
Yeah. So first of all, I chose my university degree based on the on the internship opportunities that were talked about before. It wasn't about the course. I was really, again, it wasn't that I wasn't studious. It was just I didn't know what I wanted to do. And everyone, it's still the same, but I feel it's changing. Everyone used to talk about university only as a pathway to the job that you want to go for. So it was always like people, that's why you have law degrees and finance degrees, and people were very specific. And I just wasn't sure. I just knew sport was my love, and I thought, let's just buy some time, basically, and keep learning. So I was, again, privileged, I would say, first of all, to have a family that could support me going to university, first and foremost. So I was very, very aware of that. But I chose a degree which I lied a bit earlier. I'm not going to lie. I called it sports marketing, but the actual degree was called leisure marketing, if I was to be very honest. So that says enough as to, the term leisure for me meant sport, but leisure for others is tourism or much more. So I kind of majored, you could say, in sport, but that was my choice. So through that course, as I said, one of the attractive parts was year 3 was an internship year. So we could go out to industry and get some real experience. And I had it set in my head, going into university, I was fascinated by Germany. We have family connections through there over the years, traveled there a few times, and I was learning the language as well from a young age. So Adidas was my main brand. I was only wearing Adidas boots and kit, and I loved the Adidas brand. I loved Germany, and I was like, I'm going to work there. That was just, it was a set in my head. I want to be there, and that was my vision. So I applied, and it was the only place I applied to, actually. And very fortunately, I think because of the energy I put into it, I was the first student from Bournemouth University to go over to Germany and take on a whole year internship, which was the best time of my life, meeting people in industry on a global level.
In which department?
Strategic marketing.
Related,
Yeah. So it was actually a new department that was, market research and strategic marketing was the branded area. But strategic marketing in particular was a brand new thing. There was literally me, my senior, and we were working directly into the board at that level in 2002, 2003. So just fascinating, right? So this was, we helped launch the Impossible is Nothing campaign back then, and privy to how such a global organization works, from budgeting to communications to absolutely everything across the business. It just cemented where I was going. It was like sport, business. I get this. I love this. I don't know where still I'm going to end up, but this is my world.
It's interesting because when you mentioned those years there, and kind of doing a segue to our next topic, which is freestyle football, to the early 2000s, we had the best commercials.
Yep.
The best, when you're talking about strategic marketing and the branding about, what Nike was putting out there, the Brazilian, me being from Brazil, the Brazilian national teams, commercials, right? The Brazilian national team in the airport and Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos being, the faces of it. You had Edgar Davids from the Netherlands. You had all these highly skilled players enjoying the game, doing, literally doing tricks. Was that environment that kind of sparked your interest and took you to the world of football freestyle? And what was that scene then?
It's a great point. And yes, first of all, like that was, I'm actually going to come back to that as a secondary stage, because to answer your question, no, initially that was not actually a trigger for me. I was aware of those commercials, everyone was, Stroga Bonito and Scorpion football and caged football and all of that. It was like, wow, this is how I want to play football. This is how I want to, to vibe with my friends and my community. And it was amazing. My actual first inspiration, which again, because I was in university through this period as well, so I was looking at business cases and concepts of how to launch things in Europe, and small business setups was one of the sections that also I majored in, and looking at how to basically create a startup. And actually, it was basketball. So And One mixtapes was my real inspiration at first. What was going on in the late 90s, similar kind of time, but a little bit earlier. So what happened with And One and the mixtapes blew me away. I was like, and I'm not a fan of basketball. I didn't know the sport intensely, but I just loved the vibe. I keep using that word, the vibe and the feel and the community that was built through that. I was like, wow, what if we did that?
The professor
was yes. Skip Tulu and the professor. They were insane. Yeah. But that was so character building, creating heroes at the street level who transform and transpire through cultural boundaries, and for a street sport to go on a global tour and end up in, with fans in Korea and in the Middle East and in the UK. And I was like, this is still, nobody knows of it, but it's amazing. and so being this side of the pond in Europe, seeing that, I was like, wow, there's got to be something for street soccer one day within this, and we could do something around that. So that was one of the back-seeded thoughts. I never really thought, to be honest, at that stage of building something around it. I just thought, that'd be cool. I would like to see that. And then we kind of fast forward a few years later. So it was end of 2005 when I was working at Reebok at that time, and I caught up with an old friend of mine who was the skills coach at Leeds United in the Premier League. He had created this it was an athlete development program. It was an accelerated learning program for children at street level, fusing music and dance with a ball. Essentially 3 versus 3 was the concept, which is now popularized globally, thankfully, in the actual development of talent. But yeah, back then, 2005, 2006, it was not heard of at all. And let alone like why the need, nobody understood it, but we came from an angle of the British, the English team especially, have this, they still do, unfortunately, this robotic way of developing talent. It's a strength, power, conditioning first, and they forget, the touch and the confidence, which, as you know, is very Brazilian first, and very, it's the love of the ball and the self-expression and the confidence on the ball first, and then you build beyond that. So yeah, we simply said, let's run to market and see, let's move back to our hometown where we've got no overheads, and create this and bring it to life. And yeah, within 6 months, it was very evident that there was a world exposing to us here that was untouched and that needed some support and structure. You mentioned the name Edgar Davids. He was one of the first people to see us after like 2 months or so of us starting. He flew over to our hometown to see what was going on, and that really then said, there's nobody else doing this, what's crazy. And then my father, being a carpenter and working at home, seeing all of this and seeing the feedback we were getting, he surprised us one day by saying, well, why don't we have our own mobile Joga Bonita court, our own 3v3 arena that we could put in the back of a van and drive into any neighborhood and create this atmosphere wherever we want. And so that's what he did. And we, again, were fortunate to just ride a wave of popularity and interest into that world. And I met the community.
That's very interesting. How was the court set up? Because, once again, another initiative that made that type of that variety of football so famous was the video game FIFA Street. Did you guys get any inspiration? Like how was the court set up? How was the early days?
So 3 versus 3. You're talking roughly. Excuse my metrics here being English, but yeah, we're talking like 10 meters by 20 meters in size of floor space. And it was a series of panel boards, so we had a wooden board bolted onto aluminium frames. So it was a pretty heavy, sturdy thing that was then bolted together and created with small goals, kind of 1 meter by 1.5 meter size goals on each end. And the boards would come up to waist height. So it was a clear entry. There was a ringed area to play within. And then it was just play. We just, a DJ would spin some records. We would just literally allow kids to come on, winner stays on vibe. So just, enjoy the ball and proper street football. Like just winner stays on. Let's just have some fun and play some games. And then through that captive audience that we had, that was when the next trigger came was, wow, these are, first of all, the kids that are playing, that have got the skills, are the ones that don't really attend school, that are causing trouble in the neighborhood. But they've got these amazing talents, and they are in the zone when they're playing and they're in this environment. This is amazing captivity. On top of that, you get the hundreds, if not thousands of people coming to watch this because it's fun, entertainment, snackable content. I was like, wow, this captive audience, we could deliver education. So going back to education, what if we could talk about bullying, nutrition, life skills, academics through this environment? So that was that next wow moment, was just seeing people play and watching people's enjoyment of the ball in a very natural setting.
That's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. So there was no registration platform, nothing of that sort.
Yep.
People would show up and enjoy.
Absolutely. I mean, we did some invitational,
type of
absolutely, But we would do some. Most of it was just pickup games. We then occasionally organise a bigger tournament where you would register. So I remember once we did a summer camp, so a bit more of an intense 5-day training program where you would come in each day and train during the morning. In the afternoon, we would have tournaments and games within the pitch areas. And the best 2 talents voted for by everyone throughout the week, we would take to Italy to an AC Milan soccer camp, so that they would have this, transformational opportunity to train in Italy with an amazing club brand as well. So that was a very successful time. But we did all of this with zero business plan, with zero knowledge of where we were going with it. It was just opportunistic in the moment, heavily borrowed on my credit cards and loans that I'd taken out to just kind of get us going. You couldn't be more cliche, honestly, with a startup. And everything that you read about it was like, yeah, done that, yeah, done that, yeah.
This is
it was a hustle, but it was amazing.
Were you still with Reebok at that time? Were you still with Reebok and you're kind of doing it on the side, or you had left Reebok then?
We jumped in. We literally jumped in without a thought. I was 24 going on 25, so I was young enough and stupid enough and didn't have any responsibilities, let's say, to family to worry about in terms of income. So I just thought there's something here, and I don't know what, but we're just going to give it a go and see what happens. And one thing led to another.
And when did this start become big enough to the point that we say, hey guys, we have something solid, it's time for us to organize and get a governance system in place?
Yeah.
When did this happen?
Question. So it was again a variety of things. So what actually happened next was, firstly, my friend, my co-founder of that first business, very kindly decided to walk from the business and leave me with all of the borrowed debt that was in there. And that was for a variety of reasons. I've got absolute empathy for him. I mean, he was not a risk taker in hindsight. He was not comfortable with borrowing, even though that was the only solution, to us getting out and bringing to market. And so just got scared. He just got intimidated by the situation and thought, I want to go back to coaching. So he literally, I got back from a trip around Europe and got a text message. This shows how old I am as well. Text message from him, an SMS saying, I'm off. I don't like the way we're going. I'm taking the coaching with me. See you. And I didn't hear from him for months. And I was like, okay. So the first thing that happened was this massive reset moment where, as I said, all that money, it was around 80 to 90,000 pounds. So what, 120, 130 US, all in my name. I couldn't sustain the minimum payments. I was improvising anyway at that time with various income from different projects, but it was risky. It wasn't a great situation, but there would have been a way through. Anyway, what that did was it forced me to push reset. So I put myself into bankruptcy because I couldn't sustain the payments. And basically had that moment then of saying, what am I going to do next? So all we were doing previously was events and academies. And so it was training based. But I'd met the freestylers through these events who were coming and playing and doing demonstrations, and a few of them in particular I kept bumping into randomly at events, at networking events and events that overseas that I was attending. And I just became big brother to them. I was very specific. I was like, I don't want to be an agent, but I know marketing. Yeah, I get the growth opportunity of what you do. So I started helping them individually without the tag of being a manager or agent, and thought, this is cool. I can help them, and I can keep in this space for a bit longer. And by chance, I tell this anecdotally. You may have heard, I don't know if you remember me saying this when we first met, but genuinely within 24 hours of me registering for bankruptcy, and so filing for bankruptcy, Abbas Farid, who was the UK champion, let's say the Nike champion at that time from a competition in 2003 that he won, he called me up and said, Dan, any chance you're available to come to Malaysia on an all expenses trip with me, because I need someone to help promote me and get more work. And so I was like, all expenses, travel, yeah, absolutely. So and he had no idea of what had just happened 24 hours earlier. So it was just being open enough in my head. I wasn't downbeat about it. I was like, okay, I don't know what to do next. Let's just see. And then this opportunity came. I just jumped on the plane with him, and the first client, so the people that flew us over, ended up being my next business partner, because they loved the idea of building a federation, which was in the back of my mind. and hosting the first World Championships in Malaysia, which then consequently happened in 2011 with their support.
That's awesome.
It's really hard to say,
awesome.
It's so, because there's so many cliches, I guess, that have happened in my journey. But I try to re-emphasize that it is genuinely that opportunistic. If you have the mindset of being opportunistic, of being open-minded, of listening to people and not just inflicting your own vision on others, you build trust, you build a network, you build a following, you build everything, and then opportunities come. You've just got to be that open-minded to it, and from my experience anyway.
Well, I'm yet to find any story of entrepreneurship that does not involve one of these moments that you like, oh, I'm screwed. There's nothing else I can do besides persist, and then good things end up happening after that. So what you're sharing it goes along with other stories that we heard, not only in the show, but in other places when it comes up to an entrepreneur pathway. So thanks for sharing that. Those are amazing takeaways. Well, you are essentially putting together at this point a FIFA for freestyle football. Who was invited for the discussions? How do you come up with the statute? How do you come up with the governance model? It's not that you have everything super tangible, right? So you probably at that time you have localized stars. Social media is only starting, right? Just trying to put into context here. It's not that you have, Aguska with millions of followers or people that know her at this point. Very local, very regional for some of those stars. How do you put it all together in one global umbrella?
You don't. you evolve. So yeah, what happened was, first of all, the dream or the vision that I had was, as I said, about education. So it wasn't about building a sport first and foremost. It was about building a support network and a bubble and a collective movement that would say, that would allow the athletes to say what they want to do. So this is a street sport, and where I think sport has gone wrong over the years because of political influence or whatever else you want to talk about. There's loads of issues with governance, which I won't bore you with all today, but I'm sure I'll touch upon more later. That they remove the voice of the athlete from the first stages. They go straight to political, organization structure and who's in what order and how do you get voted into power. And all I did was simply focus on the ball. If you want to keep it really simple, I was like, right, that ball is our tool, that's our object, and then the athletes are the most indispensable part. If they're not happy, they're not going to perform or compete or do whatever they want. At that exact same time, so 2008 to 9, what happened in sync, in parallel with these ideas, was Red Bull launched a competition called Red Bull Street Style. And they, in my opinion, performed two of the classic problems with sport, where as a brand or a broadcaster, they obviously are both, they created this dictating model where they created firstly a logo that used the image of an athlete without his permission and no benefit to it. So the athlete was very annoyed, obviously, and refused to participate in anything that they do, and just instantly created aggression in the community from day one. And the second thing was they created the rules. They said, right, this is how we're going to judge this event. You're in charge of style, you're in charge of control, and you're in charge of difficulty. And then they had judges that were dancers or footballers that didn't know freestyle tricks. So it was all about the image of what they wanted on TV. It makes sense. Like, I get why they did it. It's about visibility and they want popularity, want people to tune in and share. but they basically forgot to listen to the voice of the athlete. Simple as that. So I said literally, well, there needs to be a body then that's going to support you, and that you can then it's credible. Like if you are all saying this in one alignment, people are going to listen over time. So yeah, that's how it started. 26 different influencers is how we would know them now, but athletes who were the community leaders. They were the creators of all the big tricks back then. They were, being hired for big jobs and performances around the world. And they were thankfully from 26 different countries, really bizarrely. So they were all like head of a country, essentially. So that was the foundation. It was working with 26 countries in the network to launch the first iteration of the federation back then. And that gave us, and all we needed was a registration document, to be honest. So I found a way of registering as a non-profit organization in the UK. We didn't need any other blessing. We just registered as a non-profit called the Freestyle Football Federation back then. And that in the same year that we managed to get the World Championships into Kuala Lumpur. And that was the big launch. I mean, but I wouldn't have rushed to register anything, I don't think, if we didn't have the event mapped in. So the Ministry of Youth and Sport in Malaysia, and the partners, as I mentioned, that we met in that first trip over there, they basically raised enough money from the government to be able to organise this first World Championships. And that kind of was my next trigger to say, right, let's register now and let's build the statutes and everything else afterwards, once we've got the voice of the community involved.
And how was it structured so every freestyler could voice their opinion when putting it together? Because listening, or not say catering, but listening to 26 people with 26 different backgrounds, it can be very challenging. So how did that we are still trying to refine that now, to be very honest with you. What happened is a lot of FaceTime, a lot of one-to-ones. Aside from languages and cultural differences, you can't generalize with anything like this. And I believe in general with network growth, you cannot generalize. You have, and this is where my Adidas experience was so important for me, of how you could create, a centralized vision and mission or call to action, aka impossible is nothing, as it was for me back then, and have that work in sync in Portuguese just as much as in Korean, as much as in German at the same time, but all with localized twists. And so really that was in the back of my mind. I didn't over strategize it. I didn't make anything complex or big strategy documents. I was very conscious about conversation being at the heart of the community. And so we just share ideas and come together at events to grow those ideas. I didn't ask anything of them, so there was no cost to being a member, or there was it was all about same visions and sharing ideas and then growing over time. So very organic. We didn't want to overcomplicate that first process. To register, of course, I had to get the documents in place. There needed to be statutes. There needed to be a system to be classed as an official association. Very honestly with you, I copy pasted a lot of it. I used examples from the industry, from tennis, from football, of what statute documents are and how it was really simple. It was a basic document just to literally for the purpose of filing the organization. We never referred to it once. We did our thing. We just literally got the papers in place to be able to get started. So now where it's at is it's evolved a lot. But now where we've got to is we've got 115 countries in the network. Currently 14 of them are registered as associations with local government. So they're not-for-profit associations recognized locally, so they can download funding and work in the institutes there. The others are made up of private entities, or in some cases still just a community leader. So at the core, though, of even if it's a registered association, as it is in Poland, for example, the most important thing for us as a federation is that there is one community leader. So this is a nominated person by the community in that country who is the spokesperson. This person is a
active member who freestyles themselves, who organizes events maybe, but they're really proactive in their local market, so everyone knows them. What they do then is talk to them. So they literally get their insights. So if people have got problems or ideas or issues with the sport, they voice them to this community leader, who then in turn voices them to us, let's say. And us now is a collection of 8 people who meet every week to build the events and to grow the movement over time. Everyone is volunteer-led still. That's why I say it's very organic. We don't have full-time positions for anyone or salaries. It's all about building this in a credible way that isn't going to give in to the political powers that be in sport. And to zoom on a little bit, the vision is ultimately to be the first community co-owned sport in the world. That's where we want to get to. So to legitimize the vote that every individual freestyler and of course every country leader has. There'll be a little bit of tiered weighting based on how much you contribute to the community and how much you know the sport. But there is a way, thanks to technologies now with like the blockchain and other ways as well, that you can actually do this in a very transparent, centralized way, a centralized way to decentralize the sport. That's essentially where we're.
Yeah. That's very, very interesting. You mentioned the freestylers, and they play a pivotal part of all of this, which is how it's supposed to be for everything, right? There's no sport without the athlete. Throughout the course of your journey, I'm sure you've heard many, many different types of upbringings for the athletes within the football freestyle. If I'm a youth athlete and I realize that I'm very skilled on the ball, what is normally the pathway? Like, how do I become a freestyle footballer?
It's a self-expression, first and foremost. So freestyle is a lifestyle. It's not about, to compete at the highest level, which is, I guess, answering where you're going here. It's about, a pathway to becoming a pro athlete, let's say. It's about dedication and time, simple as that. So this is, for me, freestyle is one of the best ways of grounding even a footballer if they really want to know what it takes to, develop yourself. Because the ball, it's only you and the ball. There's no escape. There's failure at the core. Like 95% of the time, you're going to drop the ball. You're going to fall over the ball. You're going to hurt yourself. So it's all about failure and learning from that, and your mindset develop over time as well. So, but how you actually do it, first and foremost, with that mindset is by juggling and by participating without competing. I'm talking about uploading a video, for example, on one of the social networks and sharing it with with peers. That in itself means you're an active member of the freestyle community and world. Then it's about joining up with jams and get-togethers. The community are really, they're so open. The world champions training with absolute rookies. They're sharing ideas all the time because everyone wants to create their own tricks and then new moves. So it's all about, sharing ideas and just coming up with new iterations of things. So it's really about taking responsibility on your own, picking up a ball in your backyard, in your front room, wherever you are, and having a go and playing and just expressing yourself for a bit. For a large part of the audience, realistically, what I'd love to say is the 200, 300 million people playing football, soccer around the world, they're all juggling with the ball at some stage. I know for a fact that you incorporated it a lot when you're in some of your training, right, with the kids. And, juggling is a natural thing to do with the ball. So you could say that that's the beginning. The reality is, to have that mindset to not give up and to keep training and do tricks then with the ball, you start to filter out different people's mentalities. And so you end up with a very niche sport at the top who commit 6 hours a day to just juggling and then pushing themselves to do tricks with the ball as well. So it takes a lot of time. It's definitely not a quick win. That being said, we've had now in the last 5 years, 2 world champions that's within 2.5 years, so maximum 3 years, they've gone from absolute beginner to world champion. So with commitment, we've got a very quick progress line ahead for anyone interested.
Do you see let's say a common trait amongst these athletes? Do they tend to be to of course there's a lot of rhythm that is involved. There's a lot of do you see a common trait that you should if I notice that I do have a little more rhythm or a little more coordination, or I have great flexibility, do you see a series of common traits among those athletes that are able to succeed at that level?
You could say yes, for sure. But the variety now is the biggest thing. So every country has a different way of freestyling as well. I think that there's one trait that I would say that I've noticed a lot, which is people from the small town. And I'm not a freestyler, but that's why I like to say this, because I include myself from a small town in the south of England. People from a small town where limited opportunities, let's say, of progression, maybe very traditional lifestyles, and the elders being, in control of their life a lot, they have tended to breed the majority of big freestylers. So Poland, for example, you mentioned Agushka already earlier. Poland is one of the hotbeds, and we're like, why on earth would Poland be so prominent? And we're talking hundreds and hundreds of really high level. We love Poland, and they've got lots of things going. They participate in a lot of things, but they don't necessarily always win lots of international sporting events. But with freestyle, we've had loads of champions over the years come through there, and one of them, I believe, is your environment. So it's where you are from and where you're brought up with, whether that's working class roots or just a lack of progression and opportunity. You tend to hone in on something and you refine that skill. And for a lot of the freestylers, it was the ball. Similarly, though, in Japan, on a totally different level, Japan is a huge thriving scene. And for them, it was about really emphasizing style. And one thing I did an interview with recently with one of the main guys over there, and I dismissed it for a long time, but actually for them, it's just about being cool. So their trait that everyone is like, pick kids who want to be cool. They don't play football, they freestyle. And so, they're wearing jeans. They're a lot more style orientated. They're more hip hop influenced. And they just want to be the cool peer in the group, in the street that people look up to. So it's a really interesting dynamic based on the culture that they are in Japan. Whereas then maybe more traditional UK, football first. So if you're messing around with the ball, then you're an idiot and you're going to get slide tackled. You don't do it. You basically don't do it unless you do hardcore tricks, because otherwise no one takes it seriously. So if you're dancing with the ball and it's like, get out of here, not interested. You've got to come hard and you've got to come heavy. Otherwise we don't love it. So yeah, I think I can't generalize the whole world over because of that cultural difference as one big factor. But the mentality of everyone is this never die attitude of, I just want to home in and be the best of what I can with the ball. And the community is around 15,000. So it's not, we're not talking about millions of people and loads of similarities. It's a very niche core community, reaching out though to everyone who can just juggle a ball at the beginning. So yeah.
It was before COVID. We attended. We just went to watch Cirque du Soleil here in Atlanta, and I cannot remember which spectacle
Lucia,
it was. But they had a segment with Lucia. You're correct. They had a segment with football freestylers, and it was the coolest thing.
Oh, that's amazing! I'm so glad you saw that.
Such an amazing presentation.
So the history is quite interesting though, because that's the circus is one of the big factors that popularized freestyle skills in the 1800s and 1900s. So we've traced back freestyle over 2,000 years actually to games like Chinlone and Sepak Takraw in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
All based on keeping the ball in the air for as long as possible and doing style moves and tricks. But then, as I said, the circus was a huge factor of growth. Before then, the Maradonas and the Ronaldinhos in the football space, made it even more acceptable to do tricks with the ball. And then, of course, the Nike commercials, as you mentioned. So there's a really interesting storyline there. But yeah, with Cirque du Soleil, that was Laura Biondo, a girl from Venezuela who lives in Miami. She was the first freestyler to get a full-time, multi-year contract with Cirque du Soleil. And subsequently, there's been a few others that have joined into that circus as well, which is amazing.
It was beautiful, beautiful. Let me take us to a different tangent here. Social media helps more than hurts more than helps. How do you see the relationship between social media and the community in general, athletes, and of course as an organizer, as a, let's say, a central pillar for the industry?
Both. It's not one or the other for me, and I'll explain why. So without social media, we wouldn't have an organized sport. So first and foremost, thanks to social media at the dawn of 2000, when NikeSoccer.com first of all was launched, with my co-founder, Steve Elias. He was the main person on the front of that website for 3 years. And subsequently what happened, people started these little forums online, and they would share videos with one another, and they would just push each other to develop new skills on a daily basis. So thanks to the early stages of social media, that's why freestyle became a thing, like as a sport then, as it now is. It's also enabled us to communicate, timelessly with anyone from Korea to the US, and we can pull the community together. We can get comms going really super quickly. We can create content and reach millions of people now. So last year alone, we just had the stats in. We reached, there was 5.6 billion video views of our content between ours and the top sort of 30 athletes. And that's only 30 athletes in our channels, right? So we didn't even go to the whole community. We just did a section, a focus on that. So visibility wise, and then what that means commercially is, of course, very exciting, because now we can talk to sponsors on a significant level about creating content for them to reach Gen Z audiences in a very authentic way. So for those reasons, love it. For alternative reasons, hate it. And I would say there is one part of the community which, unfortunately, we're an organic growth organization. We don't have the ability to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, to the winners of tournaments. So to stay a pro athlete, it's not rewarding. I mean, you finish university studies and you go into the real world, you need to earn some proper dollar to sustain yourself. So unless you're a top entertainer who's constantly booked out or hired by Cirque du Soleil to go on tour, it's hard to sustain an income. So a chunk of the community have gone into the influencer world, which is the bit that I really find personally, it's just so fickle and short term. It's all about how many people are following, and then potentially how many people will see your video as to how much money a brand would pay you. It's all like take. There's no give economy with that from my point of view. So the attitude of some of the athletes, therefore, is less about community, more about self-protection and growth and money. Social media has fueled people to think about money more than it should, in my opinion, at a community level. And then you've got, people can manipulate it. People can, they do a show somewhere and then they call themselves a world champion in order to get more gigs in the future. So it's hard to monitor and mediate.
I see.
It can be hard to mediate.
I see. It makes sense. It was a little bit of my thinking too. Without social media, it would be very difficult for people to stay involved. You say out of the 15,000 roughly in the community, what percentage you say that makes a decent living as a freestyler?
That's a good question. I would suggest, based on what we know in terms of activity levels, you're talking 5%. 5 to 10% are full-time performing or coaching or competing. And a lot of that is, as I said, the content creation world now. So thankfully that is there because it helps sustain people to freestyle. Again, it's a positive, not just a negative, right? It drives income, so it helps them to achieve their dreams. But yeah, most of the others are students still, so they're young enough to not have too many overheads, and they're able to do this alongside studies. And before the real world kicks in. So it's a very youth orientated sport.
Yeah.
I mean, the top ones, just to add.
Where are you seeing the most?
Sorry, I will just actually add the
sure.
The top ones, of which I would name 20 to 30 currently, are earning significantly. And I mean, like, millionaire level of 2 or 3 of them especially have really nailed it in the content side and the brand development side of what they do. And they've earned very, very well. So, you know, there is a huge output, but the majority, it's a hard slog to live from sport. You know, it's an amateur sport at the end of the day.
Well, honestly, it's not that different from a regular footballer scene, right? So you have the top 5% that will earn the massive contracts, but 60 to 70% of professional footballers are minimum wage or slightly higher than that. So it's not that different. The difference is just if you talk about absolute numbers, right? The sheer number of practitioners, but that's it. One correlates to the other.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing globally now the like you mentioned Poland being the hotbed, and then where else around the globe you're seeing talent coming up?
So, well, there's all kinds of amazing little pockets, and it stretches totally east to west. So Japan, I mentioned first. Japan are one of the strongest, to be honest. They are really top level, and especially on the whole continent of Asia, they lead the way. Mexico have always had a very strong following and participation, as of Colombia as well. So Colombia and Mexico. Brazil, it's more of it's lifestyle in Brazil, as you know. This is like everyone juggles along the beach. Everyone can do it around the world. It's just it's less about sport there. It's just more participation. So that's a phenomenal for the grassroots for us in Brazil. And then Eastern Europe. So Poland is very strong. Scandinavia also. As I said, think remote places. Think places where there's lots of smaller villages and towns where the kids need to be occupied and push themselves.
That's very awesome. Then, out of you mentioned that education and the fact that you're dealing with street youth in parallel to the events and all of that. What was your most proud accomplishment on that side? A project that came up parallel to an event that was very successful. Just share a story of that extra splash, not only the event there, but what happened educational wise around the community.
Ooh. Where do we home in on? There are so many incredible individuals that have literally transformed their lives, and they've put me on the spot there. What can I reference? I probably the bit on a personal level, I would say. So on a personal level, there's been A couple of one individual I'll mention first of all, called JK. He's actually from Korea. I keep saying Korea as well. And this he came over to London back in 2000 as I was starting this, so 2008, 2009, on his own with $100 to his name, and literally wanted to learn the trade of street performances and to be the best entertainer he could. And we're talking, I mean, he wasn't a street kid. He was well enough, he saved enough money to buy a flight to come to London, but he had no money on him and just knew that he had to put himself under that intense pressure to develop. And yeah, long story short, over a period of time, he was sleeping rough. He was doing whatever it takes, and then every now and again he'd make enough bit of money to stay in a hostel, and he'd find some jobs. And I fortunately met him on the second week of him being over there, so I didn't rush to support because I didn't know everything about him at the time. But together I sent him off around the whole world performing, and he earned a lot of money in the following couple of years. And he's gone on to be, he is the body double for every Korean footballer, including Heung-min Son at the moment, in every TV advert that you think of. He's a huge influencer over there in Korea. So it's like a real rags to riches story of someone but he invested in his own time. That was the thing for me. He had the mentality that he knew he had to push himself to an extreme level. And then you just got, there's so many, as I say, good stories of people coming through from nothing. Oh, Becca. Let me talk a bit about Becca. So this is a British girl who is now just finishing her GCSE, or just finished her GCSEs, which is our high school exams in the UK. She has grown up with severe, and I mean like high end of the spectrum, autism and growth disorder. There's too many things. It's one of those people that, is constantly in hospital for something. It's like unreal. She's one of the strongest girls I've ever met. She picked up a ball out of curiosity, and I think she saw something on social when she was like 12. And thankfully, from the environment and the community and the family that we've built, she found her home. Like, we're talking literally to the point I get goosebumps and a bit emotional about this every time I talk. She's literally survived because of freestyle. So she found for the first time somewhere that she can just train with a ball, zoom in. She started talking to people for the first time. Her parents were in tears with me, like, couldn't believe what development had happened in the space of weeks of being part of the community. Her school allowed her to use freestyle as breaks in between the exams. So to complete the exams, she could take as many breaks as she wanted to just freestyle, so that she would, build the confidence and strength again to carry on.
Calm down and bring back to
unreal human who has thankfully, because of the community, enabled to get through education and enter the real world. So yeah, that's that. There you go. You did find some examples out of me after all.
Well, then I think that's your calling, my friend, and we're very thankful for the work that you do and how you impact so many lives with your drive, with your knowledge. So I appreciate you being in the show, sharing so many cool stories with us, and making it known the impact that you making with this kids, with this communities. How do we get involved? How do we find the WFFA? How do we find you? Like if I want to tag a video of me juggling, like how do we get involved?
All you need is a ball. Simple as that. Genuinely, to start out, I think the best bit of advice, first of all, is the balls are everywhere. Like, it doesn't have to be a regular sized football. You can use anything to begin with. Have some fun. Go, unlock your own curiosity. Be a kid again and ask why. And just have some fun and play. We need to encourage more people to get out into the streets and play and express themselves more. to really get involved, I mean, yeah, the events are free, so anyone can join, from absolute beginner to someone who's been training for years. So I would, look out for an event series. You can follow everything at the WFFA, so THEWFFA. That's our association's main accounts on all the social channels. TikTok and Instagram are the primary ones. So you'll see there'll be one event in the US this year, one major one anyway, in New York in the end of August. It's going to be. So we'll have the best athletes from all of North America coming there. So people can come and hang out there and watch it and have a go themselves, not on the stage if they don't want to. They can just join in the jam with everyone. Look on social media. You can find people pretty much everywhere. So, see if there's anyone nearby so that you can train with them and share some ideas. It's always better, even though it's individual, it's nice to share it with others. I think that's the main thing. And then, yeah, you can follow it all on any one of those channels.
Awesome. Where are the dates for the US event? I can probably organize
there,
myself
absolutely.
too.
27th of August. It's actually in Jersey. I tell her that it's at the American Dream
Nice.
venue in Jersey and East Rutherford. So most people will be staying in New York, but then the event will be at American Dream.
Awesome. We'll
Cool.
talk more about that. Hey, stay here in the studio and after we finish, because we'll chat. And for you guys, out there following, listening to us, this was Dan Wood, co-founder and head of partnerships of the World Football Freestyle Association, professor, mentor, life changer, Dan Wood. Dan, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Leo, for those kind words, and it was a pleasure. Really good to speak to you.
Awesome. We'll leave all the links, how to find them, how to find the freestyle community. We'll leave everything here in the description of the video. If you like this episode, please give us a like, share. Make sure you let everybody know that you've been listening to Nexty Talks. Okay, I'm Leo de Souza once again. We'll see you guys next month with another episode. All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Take care.